Is how to work with administrators, and actually I've been in education 38 years. The last 7 years I've worked with our music and drama teachers in my district as the performing arts curriculum specialist. I do everything but evaluate the teachers, but I spent 7 years trying to teach the athletic directors, who they now call activity directors. They're all jocks, face it, right? I spent 7 years trying to explain to them this is instructional, this is co-curricular, and really sorting that out and making them not compare us to sports. They used to call us, like we do our state solo and ensembles. It's with our high school activities association, and they call the music teachers coaches and their teams. And so, there's a certain perspective of some administrators, and other ones are great, but there's always some that you have to educate. So we're going to talk a little bit today about educating. If you don't have the equipment you need, the time you need, how you can leverage some of the tools we have at NAFME. You can say NAFME now. Just a little bit about great teachers according to administrators. They don't always have the great lesson plans, but they have the best relationships with kids. We've talked about that this morning. When you're interviewing at jobs, you really want to talk about relationships with kids. They understand that developing the right classroom climate is a prerequisite to teaching the right plan. When I first started teaching, maybe took me 2 weeks to get the kids all kind of gelled together, and then we could go from there. About mid-career, it took me probably a quarter to get the kids all working together and doing what they needed to do. And in the end of my career, it probably took a semester or more. And sometimes all you get done during the day is just teaching kids how to be good human beings. And to me, that's enough. With a little content thrown in, but they have to be good human beings, first of all. They don't show up for work. It's a passion, not a job. I think we have all that covered, right? They're not intent on winning battles with students. They understand that in a battle, nobody wins. And so in our district, we do a lot of nonverbal communication. I know we had this last session with transitions, but we do a lot with nonverbal communication. So if a student's wandering around the room, you just look and point to where you want them to sit. And I watched my beginning teacher mentee do this. He pointed to the chair. He didn't say a word. And the student was walking around, pointed to the chair. Third time, the child sat down because there's no battle going on. And so how do we do things non-verbally with students to avoid that kind of a conflict? Kids leave the class feeling better. Well, we know that happens in music, so that's covered, right? They look past the bad attitude, and they realize there's always something else going on. So some days you have a bad day, starts out bad, but you turn it around because it's for the kids. So what do they want from teachers? They know there's times they don't know things, and if you can, I gave a session in Indiana one time, and the teachers, none of them felt like they could talk to the principal, and I don't know why, but if you don't talk to your principal and tell your principal what you're doing in your classroom, how it relates to the standards, how you're assessing the kids, how you're showing growth, they will not take your class seriously. And so that's your job to do. NAFME's done a great job with helping music become a part of ESSA. We're doing a great job on the state level, and now it's your turn as teachers to really help people understand about music, and I don't think we do that enough. They appreciate your advice. Well, some of them do, some don't. We have a principal who I just went in and talked to about scheduling, and he said, I'm not interested in scheduling around music. And then I just kept talking because I thought first he has to get that out of his system, and then I just kept talking about why we needed to change the schedule for kids for class period time. We were losing class time, and by the time I got done, he would never admit to me because it's a male-female thing too with him. But the next day he had a meeting with his staff, all of the teachers that were involved. It was music, it was other classes, and he said, well, let's think about this scheduling. So it was his idea. And sometimes you just have to plant a seed and not care if you win or lose, or he gets it or not, or she gets it. It's you're planting that seed, and then if it's their own idea, sometimes it's great. It's getting done. Bring an issue to their attention, but don't whine, complain, or anything. Come with a solution. And I'd have to say that's the best thing I've ever done in my 7 years. It's like I wanted to see a change, so I would bring in, here's what it's going to cost, here's what it's going to look like, here's who it's going to be involved in. think about all those aspects, come in with this plan, and if they have no reason to say this won't work, they'll most likely do what you ask. And so having that as a backup when you go in and talk about something, I'll give you some tools to do that, is a great idea. So how many of you are aware of ESSA, the new No Child Left Behind? I'm hoping all of you know about that. We actually have a page called Everything ESSA. If you just Googled NAFME and Everything ESSA, that page would come up. It's a couple of clicks in on the Advocacy tab to find it. But in the new legislation, because we've gone to the Hill every summer for the last 8 or 9 years, and Brock, who was the college kids that went to the Hill in here? Can you talk about what your experience was, what you did on the Hill? You can both have a shot at it.
Yeah, so we kind of had like a briefing before, so learned about the law and the process of getting the law and how it's different from the previous law, and then you have two parts of this. You've got the law that's long term and says these programs can exist and they can be funded in these ways, and then each year there are appropriations bills that come through that actually fund those programs. So the program can exist but not be funded, and of course if that's the case, then the program won't be successful. And so we got all this information, and then we the next day went to Capitol Hill in little delegations by state. So we traveled with the president from Archimie, from the state federated version of NAFME, and saw senators and congressmen in the Capitol buildings, and just sort of shared with them why these programs were important, how they could affect music, and our own personal ideas about the value of music in a person's life.
So what story did you share?
Well, we only got to meet with one actual senator. The other two were staffers. We saw two senators and one staffer, right?
And I'll pause you right there. It doesn't matter if you see a senator, representative, or their staff.
Because we'll all do the same? Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes it's better to talk to the staffer because really the 20-year-olds are running our government. Mm-hmm. When you think about it, because they're doing a lot of the background work, they're doing a lot of the research, the writing. But what story did you tell?
Well, I didn't actually really get to share.
What story would you have told?
It was such a fast-paced thing. But Senator Bozeman, whenever I saw him, he came up to me and was just like, "And who are you?" And wanted to talk to me just about the marching band and what it did for me and everything like that. So we were just kind of chatting about the Razorback football team and then the marching band and stuff like that. So he was making that connection, and I knew that he was trying to relate to me, but that was the best way that he knew how, because he was on the football team, so we kind of had that little connection.
Which built a relationship. Yeah. We made a commitment 9 years ago at NAFME to really focus on advocacy, so we started going to the Hill every year, and for 8 or 9 years we've done this now, and the college kids that came have been telling a story about how music changed their life, how it was important in their life, that first-hand story. We don't need data. We don't need this many kids are in music, this many kids aren't in music. It's those stories that touch them or kind of hit a nerve about, something in their past. And we had, in my own state, we had one guy that we talked to every year, and he can talk, he's 20-something, he could talk on education for an hour with us. Another guy wasn't really too interested in talking to us, but when we looked at his last name, it was the same last name as a music teacher in our state, and we said, "Are you related to Cheryl McIntyre?" And he said, "Yeah, that's my aunt." Well, now we're all best friends. The next year we come, he's like, he wants to, talk a long time. So it's the relationships and the stories. So this is happening now on a state level. With the ESSA plans, we're just trying to get our state MEAs into what's going on with those ESSA plans. Those ESSA plans had to be written last year and approved, and a lot of them have started now in the districts. And so this is all about well-rounded education. There's no more core or anything. We're all in the same game. Music is listed as its own subject. Then there's the arts, there's PE, geography, all of those other things. And so that's the one victory that we have really been proud of. Another one is with the new administration, there wasn't a budget for a long time, and so now they finally passed a budget, and we have either gotten the same funding, one of the title areas has tripled, another one had, over what we had asked. So, I mean, that's another great victory, because Title IV, we have a coalition of subjects, counselors, music, PE, all of the kind of non-core classes have this coalition, and we had actually time on the Hill last fall to do a presentation to the staffers and the senators and the representatives, and they had some pretty great questions when we were done, and so you can tell they're really starting to understand this. We can also go to the Hill, and the staffer will sit and tell us everything that we want, our talking points. So it's like, we're done here? You know it all. That's great. And so, over time, this has really paid off. So I would have to contribute a lot of that proper funding or overfunding, what we wanted to NAFME, because one of our staffers was one of the leads on that coalition to help the funding. So here's just a little bit. Now, I'm a person that did not like government. I did not like, a lot of things, and it's like I'm in the middle of all this, but so it's not hard. If I can get it, you can get it. And so when you can talk to your administrators, you're going to know more. We actually did a session in Arizona, and it was about ESSA, and there was administrators there because they invited the administrators, and they walked out of there saying, we know more about ESSA now than we've learned from anybody else. So music really does have a leg up on all this, and if you can talk this talk, you're going to show them and a lot of, I had somebody tell me one time, my administrator just doesn't even want to follow this. I don't even think that's legal, so they can say, no, it's the law that this happens. So Title I is for disadvantaged kids. They have flexible accountability systems, so they have to do a needs assessment, and in that they can say, we're all in the same pot of money, that's the problem, but if you go in with your plan and say, could we just add these instruments this year, or could we add one course or one teacher, and then everybody puts their requests in this pot, then at the end of the year when they get funding, they have to show and prove how they actually did what was put in that needs assessment. This is a good one. The law says we can't pull kids out of any class for remedial work. So has anybody had that situation? It's the law now. They can't do it. So if you want this slide, let me know.
That would be awesome, actually, because constantly I've got kids say, my math teacher needs me to make this up. And I'm like, no, you need to be in band.
And I think that's a conversation you have to have with your principal and say, this is the law, you can't be doing this, so would you share that with the teachers, because they keep trying to take them out of my class. In our situation, we have a long story, but I won't go into it. But we have interventions and large group during the day, but we also have like sectional instrument classes, so those kids really have 2 music classes in the middle school, and we made an agreement that if you put large group during the same time as interventions and advisory, then if you have to pull a child out for some work for a period of time, we're agreeing to that because we're putting it during this time and kind of using this period for 3 different things. So, but there is this as backup here. So this whole Title IV has to do with all of those well-rounded subjects and the big pot of money that we're all sharing. So like I said, if there's a plan that you can put into place, and think of it as a 1 to 5 year plan, like year 1 we want to add this, year 2 we would like to add this, year 3 we want to add this, and what are the costs for those, and be reasonable because you have to know you're sharing that pot of money with everybody. Okay, we've talked about that one. So you have a state advocacy leadership force person. We call them ALF. Has anybody watched that cartoon ALF from like the 80s with the little monster guy or the alien guy? We realized we had to have somebody in charge in each state to help with the state legislation and make sure that music was listed in the appropriate places and Some people have been successful with all the areas. Some people have been successful with a couple ones, but that was our next step. So now it's up to you to see what's going on at the district level. So if you have enough information to talk about things that you need to talk about, that's going to be great for you. So if you want to, who are all the teachers in here in the field right now? Do you feel like you have enough time with your kids? Mm-hmm. Who's got enough time?
I do.
Good. Who's got enough equipment? Who has the right kind of facility?
I'm very blessed.
I'm with you. I have the same way in my district. How about scheduling? If you're in high school, are you scheduled against AP classes and those kinds of things that kids? So this is called our Opportunity to Learn Standards. Have any of you heard of that? This is actually on our standards page, because if you're not teaching the standards to where kids need to be, let's say your kids are in 3rd grade, but you're teaching them 1st grade standards, there's something wrong with your time or your frequency or your equipment. And so these are basically checklists. There's a basic side and a quality side. So it looks like this. And you just check down the boxes and see where you fall and where the deficiencies are. This was written by music program leaders like myself across the country on what should be a quality music program. And so it's that checklist. We're deficient in these areas, and I would like to maybe present this plan on how we can raise this to where we need to be. So we have them. Every strand that we have for the standards has a checklist. So band or ensembles, general music, K-12. So you can find those on there. So one of the things I learned is never compare yourself to athletics. And if they try to, just say, we're different from athletics. We have our own needs, and I just want to talk about the needs of our music classes, because you're not like them. On the other side, my staff has to say, I have one teacher that just never lets this go. She thinks the junior high basketball coaches are being paid more than we are for our co-curricular before school groups. And we've sat down and done the math and showed her, and every year she comes back, they're getting paid more than we are. So work with administrators to schedule music first. Now, that's hard to do, but it's possible. And sometimes when you, I know they have to look at traveling teachers when they're scheduling, but if you don't point out in the schedule that, you shouldn't put an AP class against an orchestra class or a band class or a choir class, can you put that at a different time? Singletons like French, foreign language, some of those things music kids are going to take. They're going to take foreign language. They're going to take AP classes. Try to see if you can schedule those. Now, there's computer programs that will schedule music for schools, and they'll schedule all the classes so that the most kids can be involved in the most classes. Then you don't always get what you want, but you keep trying to ask for things and shuffle things around, and that's kind of my job. I try to, just keep the administrators and saying, could we try this? Could we try? It's that time of year right now where I'm doing a lot of negotiating, trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle for next year and hiring and all that. So we also want to tap into, like I said, general music or general education things. So our school has this big thing about 21st century skills. We know that 21st century skills are going on in our classrooms all the time. But we sat down and we just looked at how critical thinking looks in our music and our theater classrooms, how collaboration looks, communication and creativity, and we wrote statements about the kinds of things that kids do. And we have this poster. If anybody wants it, I can send it to you. But this shows that we're listening to what they want us to do, and we are doing what they want us to do. And when we got to working with the standards in music and updating it to the new standards, I came up with this plan of we want to do this first. It was kind of a timeline. Well, the whole district then came out with this timeline, but they would never admit that it came from music. I mean, it had to have come from what I did because it was so closely related to what I did with my music staff. And I'm not saying that as bragging, but again, they can't ask us for help. They can't admit we know how to do a lot of the things that they're trying to do. And I don't care if they don't recognize me. I just want them to do, things like we're doing and try to help them out. All the curriculum specialists in my district will sit down and have a meeting. I've written books on assessment and curriculum. I've given sessions across the country. But I open my mouth in there, and they shut me down every time. And I finally had to say to my curriculum director, I'm not going to talk anymore because there's really no use for me to talk anymore. And she's like, what do you mean? But the art specialist gets what we're doing. We're both in that room. We could really help them. They're reading books on how to do assessment, authentic assessment. When we've lived that life, we could help them with those things. So again, how do you portray what you do that pertains to what's going on in the general education world? How can we fit into it's actually what we're doing anyway most of the time. So I don't know, has anybody seen this video, An A is Not Enough? We have to strive for perfection. And this band director plays an excerpt, the beginning of a piece, and then he turns and talks to the parents and says, I'm going to let the kids make one mistake. So I'm going to let you listen to what that one mistake sounds like. And that's still an A. You can't hear him at first, but you'll hear him after a second.
Note still all the right rhythms. I would almost stand and bet you that was 100% accurate. We like 100%. We love high scores. 100%. See, because we come to the musical table expecting that. And that's what we call mediocre. We demand perfection of our kids in music. We teach them that. We teach them it's unattainable. We teach them to strive for it and to go beyond it. Now, if we were in any other class, academic class, and your kid brought home an A, my kid came home with an A, I had an A stat, and an A goes from 90 to 100. So we'd like to give you a 90. A 90, still an A. It's an A. And I'm going to allow each person to make one mistake, just one. Everything else has to be flawless. They can play a wrong note, wrong rhythm, wrong articulation, wrong intonation, wrong intonation, wrong release, wrong attack. Just one mistake though, 90%, ooh, it's an A.
So he goes on to play it musically, and so you've got the perfection, then you have to add the musicality to it. And so we really do demand perfection from our kids, whereas other courses you can do quite a bit and not have the same results. I've talked about the standards before a couple of times. So how to talk about the benefits of music to administrators? We know there's the heart part of it, and we know what it does for other subjects. We know what it does for them as a human being. And so you can tie it into all those. Before, it used to be the Mozart effect. You listen to music, it makes you smarter. But there's so much neuroscience out there now that really proves that. I have a video later on where playing a musical instrument is the only activity they have found that uses the whole brain. And so, that right there, I did a session last week at the National School Board Association conference, and I titled it Full Brain Power, How Music Can Change the Culture of Your School or something like that. But I don't think people realize what that does, and it's building those connections across the hemispheres of your brain. So we'll look at that. Also, kids, we know there's lots of data out there for kids are more engaged in school. That might be the only reason they come to school. So attendance improves, graduation rates improve. Now there's social emotional learning, and we know that in music, kids can come in and express themselves, and it lowers their anxiety being able to do that. We also help them feel successful in what they're doing, and that success is carried out into other classes. So there's like a ton of reasons why music is good. So in my district, we put this kind of thing on inserts for the programs for parents to read. We might play videos of probably the video I'm going to show you on here, just so we can get parents thinking about the importance of music too, because when you run into a problem in your district, you can't be the one trying to fix it. The parents may have to come and help you. So you're actually educating the parents, and they're the ones that are going to come in and do the advocacy for you. Let's see what else we have. Lots of different things. You can read those. Kids learn teamwork, they learn collaboration, all those 21st century skills we've talked about. They have better confidence. I would bet any kid that comes into class says after they leave, I have more confidence because of music. I'm able to stand up and actually talk in front of people. Something I didn't do when I was younger. I don't think I talked out loud till my first year of teaching. So now look at what I have to do. So it does change a lot of things about a student's life. And what if you don't have a music, do you have a music supervisor? Okay. Do you have a music supervisor? Sort of. Sometimes there'll be a teacher lead that's a music, kind of in charge of music. Sometimes you have a person like me who's a curriculum specialist. Sometimes you'll have an outright music supervisor. But if you don't have one, a couple of it, we had a half-time music supervisor. And another teacher and I wanted to make sure teachers were teaching with the standards in our district, so we just kind of started nudging people from the middle and just kind of took over and said, hey, if you want to learn about this, come and do that. And after a while, the people that didn't really believe in standards started to come into that fold, and it got bigger and bigger. So you can have somebody kind of take the lead on that. Work to build trust with your administrators, and that goes both ways. Some of my teachers really feel like administrators are the ones that will pull out the rug from under them, and so anytime there's some new way to adjust something in our district, our budgets, whatever, they always go to the very negative. Always assume the positive. I mean, nobody's out to get you or ruin your program, but so if you have kind of that assume the positive, I think that's going to carry you a lot farther. So budgets are always a huge issue. How's money in Arkansas? Is it good? West Arkansas?
I think it depends on
It's
the
much
area
better
in
in
Arkansas
Northwest
you're at.
Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And, just the school district.
But how about state funding as it funnels down to your school districts? Is that pretty good?
It's pretty good. It's better than a lot of states.
Yeah. So that's good. We talked about this before, developing maybe a 1 to 3 year, 1 to 5 year, 3 to 5 year plan, and using those opportunity to learn standards. Purchase instruments for students in need. We have to talk equity and access to equipment. I mean, in my district, they've always talked about equity across the board. We used to charge students in elementary school $5 for a recorder. Now the school district said we just need to provide them for kids. And so they're always looking at how can every student participate with no barriers. And that's what I love about my district. And so kids that want to play an instrument, we have a rental program. It's $90 a year, but we waive it. I'd say we probably waive 50% of our rental contracts now. As before, maybe we're a handful here and there. So we're providing more and more. We even have to have things like shoulder rest, valve oil, those kinds of things for kids, so they have what they need to learn. And if you're going to purchase instruments, buy the better quality instruments. You may have less instruments, but you're going to have less repairs and less replacing frequency. So fair and equitable. Oops, sorry, wrong button. Fair and equitable across the district. When I first took this over, the high school band director was a friend of my music supervisor, so his budget was 3 times the amount of other people. Some people didn't have budgets. Some people would have accompanist paid for, other ones the PTA paid for them, the principal paid for them. It was like, try to establish equity across the district. So if a kid moves from some school to another school in the district, they're getting that same quality experience, and so that's very important for kids. Technology. Do a lot of schools in Arkansas have students have their own laptops?
Not in East Arkansas.
Okay, so depends on where you're living. Yeah, and so access to technology. If we're going to have this computer, how can kids use it in music and kinds of things? Can you find free on the internet? Are there student licenses that are cheap? We have Quaver. Who has Quaver in here? Yeah, we have Quaver. All my teachers have Finale and Smart Music, and then elementary teachers have Quaver, and so we're looking at now, there's Music First, I think, which is like music, but it also has sight reading and all those kinds of things on it. So building those kinds of things into the budget so it's supplemental is great. We actually have, this is really weird, but kids that play large instruments have one at school and one at home. And that's hugely expensive. But our kids can't take instruments on the bus, so that's something else to think about. If it's bigger than I suppose something you can keep in your lap, like clarinet, flute, they can take those. But when it gets to be big, they think of it as some kind of trajectory thing that's going to kill a kid, so we can't take any of those on the bus. And so, there's our argument to provide that for them. Having a music library. My teachers all have their own music library, but if it ever gets to the point where we have to just have one big library and share, we've kind of gotten around that by saying, here's a Google Doc. We have all of our library, all of our pieces listed on this Google Doc, and then they borrow from each other. So our budgets haven't increased in the last 5 years, so they start to borrow from each other. So what are we advocating for? We want to advocate music for all, not just for the ones that can pay. We want to reach the other 80% in high school. So what kinds of things could we do in high school to reach the 80% of kids we aren't reaching, 70 to 80%? Guitar classes. Music tech. Music appreciation. Yeah, and even in our own classrooms, if we talked about culturally responsible teaching at another session, if we start to incorporate things into our classroom that appeal to a larger population of our school, they're going to want to be in band, choir, and orchestra. So how do you play a wide variety of music? How do you have projects where maybe that would interest them? So start to think about that. We want to remove barriers to kids, instruments, equipment I talked about. Scheduling. We even have transportation to events. I mean, we have a school, we may have an orchestra concert with all the elementaries and middle schools and high schools that all feed each other. And since this particular school, the parents all work, we actually provide pizza for them, and we have a bus that takes them over to the concert, and then the parents have to take them home. So how do we remove barriers for kids? So for you, this is a big one. Be proactive, because when something comes up, you can't all of a sudden say, well, wait a minute, we can't do that. You always have to kind of be looking at how you can get the positives of music out there to the PTA, school board. I do a presentation every March for Music in Our Schools Month. This year we have a composition class, a student who composed a trio. In the high school, these 3 boys sat down and played, and I talked through the standards. So I'm teaching them about the standards and what they are. So we looked at the music, we heard the music, we responded to the music during this meeting, so they got a real feel for what we do and how rigorous it is. Make a plan at the beginning of the year. What am I going to put in the programs? What am I going to have as videos I can show? How can I have students talk about music? How can I teach parents about music? How can I teach administrators about music? How can I put things in the school newsletter? We have a district-wide newsletter. It's an email newsletter. And I would say we have music in there almost every week. Something that went on. Take a picture, write a little story about it. write a paragraph, a caption, a sentence, anything. Just to keep music in the forefront of what's going on. And that pro-advocacy, when we played one time at a school board meeting, we didn't have any budget cuts on the table, and I heard a school board member say, well, how could we ever cut something like that? You know, it wasn't even on their radar, but they're already thinking, I don't want to cut something like that. Involve parents in the advocacy. Celebrate successes. Again, put those in the newsletter. Here's how many kids went to our All-State this year, or we're in the solo ensembles contest, or my elementary kids did something really cool with music on Veterans Day. Sure, some schools have boosters. We don't. We're not allowed to do fundraising. So the school even pays for the music trip for the high school kids, but we can only go to Minneapolis, which is 200 miles away, but still they pay for it. You're going to have to build consensus within the teachers in your district about how you want to do this. We had a situation with this advisory intervention large group class period we had. We had a task force for 2 years that I was on to talk about how we want to reschedule because they really wanted to get interventions involved. So I was gone one meeting. We had already proposed something from music to put it during advisory and intervention time. And I had one meeting I was gone because my dog was walking around in circles, dizzy, and I had to go figure out what that was about. She was okay. But they voted at that meeting because I wasn't there. My assistant superintendent and I we don't fight, we just nudge each other back and forth. So they voted that day, and they decided to not tell the parents about this change, which is a big change. I mean, they wanted to put music, large group, and intervention after school. What does that mean? Not good. Well, we'll move activities to after that. That's fine, but what about dance and piano lessons and karate and all those other things they didn't think of? And so the one particular school went rogue on me. It's the same lady that complains about the budget every year. She decided she was going to tell the parents what was going on. So luckily they left me out of it. They stuck to the facts. There was actually a principal there, so being transparent, if you do need to notify parents of something going on, be transparent, invite a principal so you're up and up with everything. And they only said the facts. They didn't get emotional. They didn't project what could happen. They just said, this is what's going to happen. The parents made a Facebook page. They had the school district in the news 1 to 4 times a day, talk radio, newspaper, all the places Facebook, everything they could do. And pretty soon our administration was like, you got to help us. And I said, well, they decided to have parent meetings to explain the new schedule to them then, kind of after the fact, which made parents mad. And I was held into the superintendent's office, and he said, you got to come to these meetings and support us. And I said, well, if they put a camera in my face, because TV will be there, I'm going to support music. So he left me out of it too. So luckily it all turned out great. They decided to go with the plan that we had originally come up with. But that one teacher went rogue. And so that could have ended very badly. So again, come together, have a plan that you all agree on or can have at least consensus on, or you're able to support it, because those kinds of things are not good for future types of things that happen. We talked about that. With administrators, sometimes there's something that they're talking about in a PLC meeting or a training or a PD session with you, and you say, that doesn't pertain to me. You make it pertain to you. I had to go to a reading conference one time. I learned a lot about how to work with kids in vocabulary, which helped me in my classroom. So always think of, it's not about that doesn't pertain to me, but how can this pertain to me? Everything you can do in your music classroom. That's my big one for today. Invite administrators to your concerts. Invite school board members to your concerts. We have Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz coming to our district on Monday. We're like one of 3 school districts selected for them to come. And I've built a relationship with the president of the school board, and she emailed me and said, would you like our school board members to be there? And I said, that's great. And she said, okay, do you want them to all be at all of these 2-day things, or should they tell you? I mean, she was like working with me on how we can get the school board members there. So again, building those relationships, always being positive, trying to be solution oriented, and then don't wait until there's a crisis. You've got to do this proactive advocacy now. So this is the neuroscience of what music can do for your brain.
Did you know that every time musicians pick up their instruments, there are fireworks going off all over their brain? On the outside, they may look calm and focused, reading the music and making the precise and practiced movements required. But inside their brains, there's a party going on. How do we know this? Well, in the last few decades, neuroscientists have made enormous breakthroughs in understanding how our brains work by monitoring them in real time with instruments like fMRI and PET scanners. When people are hooked up to these machines, tasks such as reading or doing math problems each have corresponding areas of the brain where activity can be observed. But when researchers got the participants to listen to music, they saw fireworks. Multiple areas of their brains were lighting up at once as they processed the sound, took it apart to understand elements like melody and rhythm, and then put it all back together into unified musical experience. And our brains do all this work in the split second between when we first hear the music and when our foot starts to tap along. But when scientists turn from observing the brains of music listeners to those of musicians, the little backyard fireworks became a jubilee. It turns out that while listening to music engages the brain in some pretty interesting activities, playing music is the brain's equivalent of a full-body workout. The neuroscientists saw multiple areas of the brain light up, simultaneously processing different information in intricate, interrelated, and astonishingly fast sequences. But what is it about making music that sets the brain alight? The research is still fairly new, but neuroscientists have a pretty good idea. Playing a musical instrument engages practically every area of the brain at once, especially the visual, auditory, and motor cortices. And as with any other workout, disciplined, structured practice in playing music strengthens those brain functions, allowing us to apply that strength to other activities. The most obvious difference between listening to music and playing it is that the latter requires fine motor skills, which are controlled in both hemispheres of the brain. It also combines the linguistic and mathematical precision in which the left hemisphere is more involved, with the novel and creative content that the right excels in. For these reasons, playing music has been found to increase the volume and activity in the brain's corpus callosum, the bridge between the two hemispheres, allowing messages to get across the brain faster and through more diverse routes. This may allow musicians to solve problems more effectively and creatively in both academic and social settings. Because making music also involves crafting and understanding its emotional content and message, musicians often have higher levels of executive function, a category of interlinked tasks that includes planning, strategizing, and attention to detail, and requires simultaneous analysis of both cognitive and emotional aspects. This ability also has an impact on how our memory systems work. And indeed, musicians exhibit enhanced memory functions, creating, storing, and retrieving memories more quickly and efficiently. Studies have found that musicians appear to use their highly connected brains to give each memory multiple tags, such as a conceptual tag, an emotional tag, an audio tag, and a contextual tag, like a good internet search engine. So how do we know that all these benefits are unique to music, as opposed to, say, sports or painting? Or could it be that people who go into music were already smarter to begin with? Neuroscientists have explored these issues, but so far they have found that the artistic and aesthetic aspects of learning to play a musical instrument are different from any other activity studied, including other arts. And several randomized studies of participants who showed the same levels of cognitive function and neural processing at the start found that those who were exposed to a period of music learning showed enhancement in multiple brain areas compared to the others. This recent research about the mental benefits of playing music has advanced our understanding of mental function, revealing the inner rhythms and complex interplay that make up the amazing orchestra of our brain.
That right there should be something you share with everybody because of that message that it brings, right? So anywhere you can share that with parents or students to share with parents, in a newsletter, anything you can do. That right there is such a great story, and it's a good demonstration. And even though it's a cartoon, it's a great demonstration of what music does for you. And we are out of time. Do you have any questions real quick that I might be able to cover if there's something going on that you see in your district? Or okay. Well, thanks for letting me share with you. It's great to be here.